Hi, welcome. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing and sharing. uh, may you and your family and your critters and the land around you, above you, below you, be well, safe. May you be favored. So, a little bit, this is a little bit about all of this. Uh, where do I start? A little bit personal and a little bit not, I guess. So, of recent, with so much of what's going on, I feel like I had a bit of an epiphany, which I shared in one of the other videos, and recognize what we've been really programmed into feeling and believing. So, for myself, uh, I could say it started at a very young age. Uh, I was adopted, and adopted to a predominantly white family, not predominantly white family, pale skinned family of Irish and English descent, and knew this somehow. And I've had uh, I've had weird messages. So where I grew up was close to what is called a reservation in Southern California, and we had quite a couple acres of land around us, and at that time, basically a farm like living. We had a lot of animals, and we had some pigs and cows and geese and goats and dogs, cats, even a rat. And after walking around, I came in through this gate that it was along the easel, and I was thinking to myself, why am I here? Why did I choose to be here? And why am I a girl, and I'm mixed with brown and white, and why was I adopted? And the message was, in my past life, I was probably a man, probably somebody very dark also, and that I needed to incarnate in this body and in this look so that I could understand a little better, maybe something I didn't understand in my past life. So I think I was about between 6 and 7. This was before any major trauma of my remembrance had happened, because at a very, very young age, I was burned with hot water on half of my body. And through the most current work of going within and figuring out certain triggers and figuring out certain emotional responses, that was one of the memories that's held in my body that needed to be recognized and have some healing work done. And then after that, I had been sexually molested. So at that point, I look at myself as more of a fresh mind. And from there, have just really noticed people around me. That was also shortly after I'd even figured out that I was adopted, because I knew I was different, but I didn't know why I was different or what made me different in the family. And there was no way of denying that, they were not my biological parents. And so they told me what ethnicity I was and what cultural background my parents had. And from there has been a search of sorts to know my biological background and to know this other part, this dream world, this connection world that doesn't really make sense and isn't highly supported. And, paying attention to the family and paying attention to certain things and being taught certain things. So my parents were of the age of what we now call hippies, and they educated me to things like social injustices and being an activist and embracing possibilities of love. And there have been different moments of dreams coming true, different moments of thinking about things such as how people looked or different dances or dress. And around that same time, maybe a couple years later, I went to a powwow, and hearing the drums and the music made me cry. And I was embarrassed about crying and kind of went and sat on a hill, and somebody came and sat with me, asked me why I was crying, and then just sat with me, an elder, so to speak. And growing up, not including things that are what I consider social construct, and also my own thought process about the human connection and the human identity. And in this, was attracted to certain things like Wonder Woman, The Incredible Hulk, and watching TV. I was amazed that there were people inside a box, and I do remember looking behind the TV trying to figure out how those people were in there. And the emotional part that wanted to connect in a way that I didn't feel connected to my biological family, and also what society was teaching me to be connected to. And over the last day, some more epiphanies have come. So with that word, epiphany, that comes from a Sibyl. Also, the name Europe comes from a Sibyl, from the Sibyl Europa. And epiphany comes from the Sibyl, I believe, I don't want to mispronounce her name, and I don't give misinformation, but epiphany is also related to Ethiopia. Apatia, I believe, is the name of the Sibyl. And through a tarot deck that I gave away, there is a story of Terra of Scata. And Terra of Scata is where the name Scotland came from. And Terra of Scata is known to be the either the great-granddaughter or the granddaughter of Akhenaten. And I mention these because in this time of wanting to share truths and share the possibilities, and I believe more, it's not just possibilities, I believe the truth in who we are, is to share information that has been somewhat hidden and comes out in different ways. So some of what I'm sharing is directly out of the book Mamiwata, the ancient priestesses, the Sibyls, the Sibyl prophetesses, written by Mama Zogbé. And there is a YouTube. You put in Sibyls, and there is a YouTube video that comes up with a lot of the writings that are in that book. So that is there for the public to check out. Also, some of the information. So I want to make sure I quote where I'm getting this information from. Some of the information I shared from the tarot card, and then some of the information that I believe has been influenced by both reading and thinking and wondering, the wonderment of certain things, and the wonderment of learning about the Mohawk people. And at this time, people in my direct vicinity were using gel to make their hair stand up straight. And I thought, how did the Mohawk people make their hair stand up? Because the only people whose hair stands up naturally look like me or darker. And okay, learning, there was some teachings to be afraid of my dreams coming true. And I had learned from others that I was to be a little embarrassed of who I am. So I'm mentioning things that are kind of flying into my mind at different times. One of the things that came to me this morning in rewatching some of, I believe I wrote his name down because I've mentioned him before. I've mentioned Dan Calloway, who does a lot of research on who we truly are, and Kurimeo Ahau. So I will actually post the spelling down below, and there is tons of information. One of them is never before seen historical depictions and images of American Indians. And the other one is, bear with me because I have a lot of writing on this little tiny piece of paper. And part one of, and they go on. There's so many parts, and he has done extensive research. And I was happy to find it because I had stumbled upon some pictures in a book that I have called The American Women of the West. And in there are these pictures of the original peoples that are very dark. And I was like, wait a second. And I'd had that book for a while. And the first time I read through it, I had still applied African Americans to being from Africa. And that's something I'm going to step into as far as how appropriation has been a uniquely construed construct that was given to us rather than us sharing these stories. Okay. So, there's some great information there. That's why I'm sharing that. Some great truths and some great history as to truths that have been manipulated. So, one of the things that I felt, so we talk about spirituality, and I've come to the conclusion to accept my own spirituality and honor others without deciding what spirituality is supposed to look like. I feel that my perception to the closest thing of spirituality is truth. And truth is a perception, and truth can be given to activate certain emotions. And I'm learning that there is sometimes a direct correlation, and also sometimes it's a total opposite as far as like what is felt and then what is truth or what is real. And I mentioned those things before because if the truth is we are from here, and that the we meaning those who have been told they're African American, then what happens? How I look at this is what I then did as a person who in my family and in my community, I was seen as black, period. And given what I look back at is specific treatment because of that. No matter what my parents look like, and definitely I had privileges and opportunities that others do not have in an economic realm, and also saw that even within the economic realm, there was still pushback because of what I look like. And so when I began my search towards blackness, I start with Africa. There is a lot of pushback here when we speak about appropriation, appropriating certain cultures that don't belong to us. That is a culture that we have appropriated to ourselves when in the educational part of appropriation or misappropriation, we learned that it's difficult to actually speak on something we haven't lived or we haven't specifically gone through on our own. So when it comes to being African and being then African American, and appropriating a story of being stolen from a land, and then appropriating certain cultures and beliefs to myself or to others that are African or seemingly African, is I believe, a structured form of appropriation where we are justified in that appropriation, and then all the other appropriations are then looked at as being unwarranted, so to speak, or unjustified. That makes sense. And through this is the emotional part that can stimulate emotions that may or may not actually appropriate to said person. But we can begin to internalize. So psychologically, it's been proven that certain people who are put through extreme trauma will admit to things that they didn't do. Is it possible that by telling us a story that is continuously trauma, that we may accept something that isn't necessarily true? So what I want to always bring into these conversations, because as we walk down that path of certain things, I want to bring in some other things and certain reminders of what I think we are. Okay. So we are the peoples who built pyramids, and as I've said before, we learned that Machu Picchu and some of the structures in South America are older than the pyramids, and that with more information, there are places here in North America, because North America includes what we call Mexico, up through Canada, that there are also structures that are possibly older than what has been found in said Africa or Europe. And we have some basic truths that have been shared with us, like the hieroglyphs in parts of the Grand Canyon, that there are tunnels in parts of the Grand Canyon. And which reminds me of the saying of like, we can dig a hole to China. Like a lot of us grew up with that kind of kid-like saying. I think there's some mythological truth to that. And to even say mythical is somewhat another form of giving the impression that maybe it's not real or it didn't happen. When there are stories of said ant people, people who came out from the earth. Another thing that flew into my mind is, oh, reincarnation and that realm of spirituality. When that is what really drew me in first to questioning certain things, because why would I ask myself, why was I here? That must mean I've either been somewhere else before, or that I've been here before. I've been before, if that makes sense. And that was what initially, and I say spiritual, say philosophical and theological questioning of reincarnation. And if we're capable of reincarnation, or if we are reincarnated, then a lot of what I had been hearing from others somewhat gave truth, but also gave some misdirection, so to speak. But that would be my original start. And if we are reincarnated, that means that we have been different things in different places. Um, there are people who have gone unconscious and will wake up with a heavy accent of a different language. Where does that memory come from? Uh, I've had dreams before I found my biological mom's side of the family. I had a dream that I met my brother. He was living in some Asian country, either China or Japan. And that when I first met him there, because we had been in contact before, and I actually think I was a man in that dream, I had walked on, like, pulled the boat up to a walking bridge next to somewhat of like a hut or a chalet. And him and his wife met me, and they had a little girl. And once I found my biological family, my brother, this brother, one of my brothers, most likely that brother, is married to an Asian woman and has a daughter. And I won't give out too much information, but just the links to the dreams. And I've had dreams where I'm speaking Spanish fluently, and can understand it fluently in the dream, and then wake up and wonder how did that happen. And I know I'm not alone in this. And if that is the case, then these are the things, you know, I wish these stories about reincarnation and people remembering who they were in a previous life was shared more on media, just shared more. Okay, what else? So I wanted to mention that because that was the general beginning of the curiosity of quote unquote spirituality, or God, goddess, the great creator. Why reincarnation, and why these certain stories? And okay, uh, the word optimistic came up. Optimistic. Opto. So O is applied to certain things. Create a circle and create the image of continuation and of one. So an optimist, optimistic, mystic, you know, the thought process of being mystic or mystical or magical or something just different that flew into my head. And okay, I think that covers most of this information. Oh, I had a question. What did we call our hair before we called it an afro? Because that also relates to Africa. And I'm just wondering if maybe we called our hair something different. And what that was. Okay. So, the reminders. There were giant trees. Giant trees. These stories have been told. We talk about the giant tree that could be seen from all corners of the earth. And that it is highly possible that we can live to be hundreds, if not thousands of years old. That's a story that's been told down, that Abraham lived for hundreds of years, as well as Moses. And we have built monolithic structures and houses and homes that not only follow the stars, also follow the equinox, also will be designed in a way that if the stars and the sun are at a certain point at the certain time of year, the stars and the sun and the moon will shine through a window, a door, a part of that structure. That's amazing. People are depicted with elongated skulls, meaning our brains are capable of holding more, or did hold more, or are capable of more. We have chakras and meridians in our bodies that hold certain energy flow, which, when pressured or released, bring healing. We know that sound can bring healing. We know that water can bring healing, and we know that it has been proven that we can project thoughts and project feelings onto water, and the water will memorize that. And the said proof of that is that Dr. Emoto, who did this experiment, was able to crystallize parts of those water and show their different crystalline structure as to the vibration that they were consciously infused with. That's what we're capable of. Thanks for being here. May you be favored. May your family, your friends, people around you, the land around you, your animals, your plants, your water be well, safe, healthy. Until next time.